Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today we're going to be taking a look at patch 4.1 finally appears, bringing with it some great, interesting new updates. There's definitely some good stuff here, and we're going to just get straight into it. The first thing listed in the blog is the Siege updates, and I'm not going to go too deep into this since the channel focuses primarily on multiplayer, but just be aware. Also, huge one right at the start as well, the skill point reset for a campaign, so that, you know, when you confederate Marathi, you won't have all blue and red line skills and no spells. You can click this button, your character will be wounded for 3 turns, and then they can come back. And I know there was mods and stuff that implemented this anyway, but it's nice to have it in the base game available for vanilla. Yeah, and then siege battles. So just some high-level notes for you guys. Buildings have more HP. Generally, siege units should still deal about the same damage to like walls and buildings, but other units will deal a lot less damage. So it makes having those siege units a little bit more important, and it makes like walls and buildings feel a little bit more impactful. Likewise, each sort of build location can only be used once per battle. You can reorganize them as you like in the deployment, but once the battle starts, you know, you can upgrade, but you can't, like, if it gets destroyed, you can't build another building in that place, right? Which prevents the whack-a-mole gameplay that was not very fun at all in sieges, that would result, you know, when you're trying to like take down an AI's settlement, for example. There's some new backgrounds. They basically imported all the old backgrounds from the various DLCs and, you know, Warhammer 1 and 2, so you can choose your favorite faction's background there. Of course, some stability, crash fixes, you know, hopefully some bug fixes as well. Again, I'm not going to go too deep into this because there's a lot of stuff to cover for multiplayer, let's just say that. So one thing to note for all battles, they've reworked the homing system, so homing should be a lot more aggressive. At the time of recording this, the patch hasn't actually come out yet, so I don't really have much of a chance to test, but yeah, the homing projectiles should be a lot more aggressive. We're talking, you know, stuff like hell cannons, doom diver catapults, magic missile spells. So it remains to be seen how well that's implemented within game, but definitely is a promising, at least promise, I guess. Yeah, there's some other fixes here, like spellcasters, if they're casting spells in the woods, will now be revealed, which is definitely a nice improvement. Yeah, some AI fixes. Well, again, we'll see exactly how effective these are once we actually get our hands on the patch, but anyway, let's go to the battle adjustments, what we're all here for on this channel at least. Single entity knockdown reactions. This is, again, interesting change than how things have worked before, right? So basically, when a single entity gets knocked to the ground, previously units would kind of just like charge around them, right? Now, depending on if the single entity gets booted out of a multi-model unit or not, they'll either charge and chase them, or else they'll actually just stay there and like wait for them to get up and immediately start attacking. Supposedly, that's kind of how they worded it here. When it's a single entity on single entity fight, when the target's knocked down, you know, the attacking entity will move forward and stand there, get it again ready to attack. So we'll see how well that ends up working out in practice, but it's definitely interesting. Hopefully it'll result in a little bit less sort of weird pathing behavior, that sort of charging around. Like sometimes, depending on where they were at in that charge animation, the entity on the ground would like stand up and get a free attack in the back, and it was just a little bit awkward the way it worked. So we'll see if this works better. I'm not sure. But again, projectile homing, so they're going to talk about this. Have a little example of Noctilus Wraith Storm ability, so you can see the before and after of exactly what they're talking about. And I appreciate them putting this in the blog, by the way. You can see on this other one, it attracts a lot more aggressively, especially, they said, vertically. So it should be tougher to dodge with flying units in particular, those homing projectiles. Previously, it was incredibly easy, especially if you, like, hard land right when the projectile's coming in. It would almost guarantee to miss. It's a little bit of a skill-based thing, but it should be interesting to see if those, you know, abilities and units are less dodgeable, if they might be more usable, because a lot of these, like artillery pieces and other units, were not particularly well taken. Some of them were very good. You know, Waystalker's one that's super cost effective and is going to be even better now. The Soul Grinder of Tzeentch was already considered a super weapon, meaning you could only take one in most tournament rule sets. for land battles at least. So yeah, very, very strong. Gonna be even stronger potentially. I actually didn't even realize personally that the Soul Grinder had homing. I've never like watched the projectiles closely enough in battle because they do move very fast, but I guess we all learned something today. Of course, this also applies to pretty much all magic missile abilities in the game. All have some form of homing, so they all should be much better. I mean, a lot of the magic missile abilities, for the most part, are not something you would want to take in multiplayer on a regular basis, so yeah, hopefully this makes them more usable, but not too strong. If magic missile spells are too strong, then it can become very frustrating to play against very quickly. So there's a very fine line that Creative Assembly's got to balance there. So we'll see kind of how this new homing, again, no damage buff at all, just the homing means you should get more consistent hits. Probably the higher damage magic missiles will become more worth it, but we'll see kind of how the meta shakes out in the long term. Army abilities, of course, as well. And then, yeah, some sort of general fixes here. These are more campaign related, but abilities. Okay, so spells. Let's get to these. One thing you'll notice, all vortexes now have this same slower speed. So literally, you know, they've gone through all the vortexes in the game pretty much, and they either 2 or 3 speed, depending on, you know, certain ones like Curse of the Bad Winds, only 3 speed. Again, slower is generally better for vortex spells because you get a lot more consistent damage. It'll kind of just hang out on top of a unit, like right where you cast it. Is more likely to get more damage. So vortex spells, certain ones were already pretty good before, but I think this will make vortexes universally just a lot better and more consistent. That's the main thing, because they could be devastating before, but if you got a kind of a bad dice roll, so to speak, on where it would path into, it definitely screw you over. But anyway, some other changes here. Life Bloom is the Lore of Life spell passive. Interesting. So they nerfed the duration, so it'll give a little bit less healing overall. Same with the Nurgle and Lore of Vampires passive. So all the passive lore attributes, every time you cast a spell, it heals your whole army. Those durations have been reduced, so it will heal slightly less overall. Not really too much, but again, sort of just nerfing healing spells here. Troll Guts duration gets nerfed. Soul Stealer also, again, the heal on it specifically gets nerfed. Rune of Doom, I believe. This is the one where it explodes casters when they try and cast spells, or no, it's the... Oh, no, it's the one that gives the attack, that's right. It previously was like the Dwarf Wa, right? Like it would give a map-wide attack buff. Now is no longer going to be the case. Instead, it's still a pretty large area of effect, 55, especially for a Dwarven like melee formations. Probably not going to be much larger than that, but still, that is a significant nerf to Thorek. I mean, he's still probably the auto pick for dwarfs anyway, but still. Fireball should now reliably explode in the center of enemy units instead of penetrate the unit entirely. Arguably a nerf if you're side-shotting, you know, it's sort of, again, a little bit of a skill thing, but if you can maneuver to the side of like an infantry block, fire down the line, do obscene amounts of damage. So that's actually slightly a nerf in that way, but in other circumstances it might make it actually better. We'll see. But yeah, penetration goes from 10 to 3. That is a significant nerf, but a larger explosion radius. So again, kind of curious to see how that ends up playing out. Probably makes it slightly worse again at higher skill levels, but more consistent at all skill levels, if I had to guess. Anyway, some skills and traits, we'll just kind of just skip over those. Items and ancillaries, there's nothing really here that applies to multiplayer, so let's just get straight into the faction-specific updates. Again, there's going to be some multiplayer, or some campaign stuff, rather, mixed in here. So, yeah, some building effects, campaign, units. Okay, so they have multiplayer caps on Zangors, which is obviously an oversight that needed to be corrected. Malagor can no longer capture points in domination because he counts as a flying unit. Should be multiplayer cost for Zangors goes up to 800, so clear nerf for Zangors. They were definitely too cheap before, and I would definitely agree. They now follow unit cap precedents set by Champions of Chaos, so they count towards Goreherd with shields. Interesting. They have an additional cap of 4 due to being a unit that has a mark of Chaos. Okay, interesting. So Ungor Herd, they get their costs reduced. Spearman Herd, same thing. Let's see, Butchers of Kalkengard get a cost increase. They're very strong, so not surprising. They have some of the best regiment renowned skills in the game, to be honest, if not the best, I might argue. Like, at least within the top 3, probably. Razorgore herds now count as cavalry for the purposes of domination. So, interesting. Okay. Some more, again, skills. We don't really care too much about that. Bretonia, just some campaign fixes. No multiplayer changes, which is interesting. Definitely interesting. Or Chaos Dwarfs, so multiplayer balance changes. The Cutthroats are getting a little bit of a cost decrease, as do the Sneaky Gits. So the Hobgoblin, sort of low-tier infantry, not true chaff, but they are sort of low-tier infantry. Get a cost reduction. Same with the Dwarf Warriors and Chaos Dwarf Warriors, so just the lower end. The Chaos Dwarf melee infantry getting cost reductions, which is nice to see. They were not particularly cost-effective before, so... let's see, Hashut's Dark Ravagers, remove the 360 firing arc. Okay, interesting. I don't know if that's applicable. Do they have other units besides just the Goblin Missile Cavalry? Anyway, let's not think too hard about it. The Great Taurus, Veiled Taurus, and Cinder Breath. Okay, so they now count as very large on entity size. Don't know exactly what all that affects, but it's probably correct. Stuff there. Anyway, moving on to Demons of Chaos. The Blue Scribes now can be taken by Demons of Chaos, which is nice. And the base Demon Prince is now included in the rare single entity cap, which is, again, nice little correction there. Not that you see demons a ton, but hey, it's something. Especially the Blue Scribes, if you're trying to meme hard with them. Let's see here. Dark Elves for units. Cold One Chariots do count towards 360 firing cap. And Cold One Chariots are no longer able to range attack walls. Very interesting. Blood Rack Medusa and Blood Rack Shrine. Small balance pass has been done to the Gaze weapon. Interesting. I wonder if they found in their testing that it was too strong previously. Explosion damage is less overall, but the impact damage is increased. Interesting. So they must have found that it was too strong, which I've found quite interesting. The Blood Rack and the Medusa were not known to be particularly powerhouses anyway, but I'd be curious to get more of an insight into this particular piece. But we'll see. I mean, with the homing projectiles, they might be a lot better with their ranged attacks, because it looks like yeah, they've reduced base missile damage, AP missile damage, bonus versus infantry. 5 shots per volley, though. Okay, so maybe I have to actually do the math. I guess it's probably more damage overall, perhaps. Less explosion damage, significantly, even with the extra shots per volley factored in. But with decent amount of AP still. Interesting. Very interesting. Okay, so Blood Rack, it's definitely a unit that I'm going to have to test out. Hopefully, I mean, if you guys play any games in these next couple of weeks with them, before I get a chance to, feel free to send them in. I'm sure some people will be messing around with them, no doubt. Let's see here. Blood Rack's Spear has also been given a measure of anti-large. Okay, so the Blood Rack unit itself is going to be a little bit better in combat. Plus 30 bonus versus large, significantly more mass. Now counts as only large instead of very large. Again, a good correction given the size of the monster. A little bit more melee attack, so a significant buff for the melee prowess. Plus 30 extra bonus versus large is pretty big, especially when it comes to the melee attack component, trying to get through higher melee defense of bigger monsters. Yeah, very interesting. Same thing for the Siren of the Red Ruin. So a nice little update for the Medusae. Probably one of the worst units. One other unit that does need help still is the Doomfire Warlocks. They're probably one of the worst cavalry units in the game right now, but we'll talk about them another time. Dwarfs, not really too much to talk about here. They already saw a nerf to one of their main lords, so that's it. For Grand Cathay, some good changes here. So the base Harmony has been nerfed. Melee defense and morale specifically. It's not much, but -2 will help kind of balance this out, I think, in the long run over the course of long games. Crowmen also get a plus 50 cost increase. So I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of a nerf on Harmony, but at the same time, I appreciate them just not just taking a sledgehammer to it, sort of making these more incremental changes. I think it'll be a little bit hard to tell until we get a few games and sort of really get a feel for the matchups and how different things are interacting, especially Jade Warriors in particular, but the Peasant Long Spears as well. In many situations could trade way too cost effectively. So again, it's a very small nerf, but I'm definitely interested to see how it plays out. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So small one, but with wide-ranging effects. It affects basically every unit on their roster, right? So Greenskins. Greenskins have also had some interesting changes. Wurzag, again, Bonewood Staff, no longer a map-wide effect. I think they're trying to move away from those lords with map-wide effects because they're such, auto-includes for multiplayer. And now has a 55-meter radius, but to help compensate, they've cheapened Black Orcs. They're now 1,000 cost cheaper. It goes for the Crimson Killers as well. Biggins also get a minus 50 cost decrease, as do Savage Orc Biggins. So a decent little cost decrease there. Their upper tier infantry should be a lot more cost effective. Even just that slight decrease helps them trade much more efficiently against elite units. You can support them properly with nice wide builds with lots of good elements. The Rogue Idol also gets a little bit cheaper as well. Night Goblin Archers, interesting. You don't see actually the Night Goblin Archers all that much, which is a little bit odd. I mean, they are a Poison Archer, relatively cheap, but again, minus 25 cost just helps you kind of squeeze them in a situation where you otherwise might not be able to. So I'd love to see these changes overall for the cost of the Greenskins. Don't love the change for Wurzag. It kind of removes the one main reason for bringing him. I think in Domination he'll probably still be good, especially in certain matchups. Land battles, if you can, again, certain matchups where you can keep him protected, but him having to be close to the front line sort of makes it a little bit tougher against factions with powerful mid-range. I mean, as it is right now, and I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but just stick with me. Wurzag can get easily sniped by air, like especially powerful air single entities, but just in general, Greenskins are a little bit vulnerable to air attacks, so in certain matchups it would be really hard to protect him. Other matchups you could protect him reasonably well as long as you kept him away from ranged damage. Now though, like dwarfs for example, are going to have a lot easier of a time trying to shoot him if he's having to come forward and actually get Bonewood Staff procs up close and personal within shooting range. Anyway, tangent over, but definitely interesting to make note of. For the High Elves, Arcane Phoenix gets a little bit cheaper, the Regiment of Renown at least. Eltharion also gets a little bit cheaper on foot and on his Barded Steed, but not on the Griffin. Griffins are still in just a horrible place right now, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit when we get to the Empire. I don't think they changed the Griffin HP at all, but I'll get on that soapbox here in a little bit. The Lithnar Princess Handmaiden also count as 360 shooting units, which they always should have. Khorne, no changes. Yeah, not a lot to say there. I think Khorne could use a little bit of help in certain areas, but overall they're fine, I think. Kislev. So Kislev also had some significant changes. They were one of the units in Shadows of Change, of course. Ostankia's ammo count has been reduced fairly significantly. And also the Gulyash now has max 5 entities that it can affect. I mean, it wasn't that amazing of a heal anyway. I think that's the heal, right? But yeah, anyway, moving on to the real big piece here. The Akshina's ambushers have been switched to primary non-AP, both melee and ranged attacks. So they kind of move a little bit off of Streltsie's territory, but they're still just high overall damage, right? So against like factions like, say, Dark Elves maybe, or Slaanesh or Wood Elves that have light armor and relatively light HP as well, Akshinas are still going to be a really good option because of that high overall damage. Greenskins too, they can sort of fight light cavalry fairly well and also have the high damage against the sort of mixed armor infantry that you can expect from Greenskins. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to see how they've been changed. Let's see here, the specific numbers are all listed. The melee attack, melee defense, interestingly enough, has also been nerfed a little bit. So just an overall nerf, I would say, for Akshinas ambushers, but definitely well deserved. yeah, and kind of were basically just Streltsy, but better. So, also, Streltsy themselves have had an HP increase, so they're now more functional as a proper mainline unit. Yeah, up to 77,470, more than 1,000 HP extra is significant, very, very much significant. So, yeah, tech changes onto the Lizardmen. There are a few big changes for Lizardmen, actually. One in particular is absolutely massive, not due to a number of factors. The entities affected and also what's actually being added. So the Slawns, obviously, as gargantuan as they are, did lack several lores which they were supposed to have access to. So now Heavens, Beasts, Metal, Death, and Shadows are all available in campaign and custom in multiplayer, obviously, for the Slawn Mage Priest. So pretty massive. Again, it's not like I don't necessarily expect any of these to be super meta. Metal is very good right now, I will say, and with Slawns casting, Final Transmutations, Searing Dooms and stuff, that's potentially nasty. And then Death also is one that's probably pretty competitive, Spirit Leech and Fate of Yuna, again, with Greater Arcane Conduit Caster, plus with the changes to Vortexes too, the Slawns, having access to multiple Vortexes potentially is something you already had, but now you have even more with, Purple Sun, right? Beast too, Flock of Doom is also in a really good spot right now as well. So just mass Flock of Dooms could probably do an insane amount of damage over the course of a long battle, so I'm curious to see kind of how this ends up playing into, if at all, the Lizardman meta. I could certainly see, again, Metal in particular being quite strong in certain circumstances, but anyway, that's the main big one. The Spirit of Tepok now has bound Barona's Time Warp in campaign, which is nice, and some of the other Bless units have had some fix, so yeah, not really anything else particularly applicable to multiplayer, but Quaddles no longer instantly die when they clip through walls in settlement battles, which is just great. Nurgle gets no changes. I'm still trying to get Kugath's melee defense nerfed and get him a little bit of missile resistance to compensate, help smooth out his balance, but it's an uphill battle, guys. Ogre Kingdoms. There's some changes here. Greasus gets faster, as does Scrag the Slaughter gets more armor, rather. Gorgers also get an HP increase, so nice to see Gorgers with a little bit of a buff there. Iron Guts also cost decrease. Interesting. Cost increase. It's been a long day, guys. Yeah, they're very good right now, so I think it's well warranted. Bulls also get a cost increase. Iron Fists and the dual weapons also have their charge bonus reduced, as do the base Ogre Bulls. Trappers also get a cost increase, so overall nerfs to Ogre Kingdoms. I think this is probably more to target their domination balance. The land battles, they're good. They're not as oppressive, but Ogres, in particular in domination, are quite strong, so I appreciate they didn't go overly ham with some of these nerfs, but we'll see kind of how this plays into their domination balance, if at all. Probably still will be quite strong in that game mode, but probably shouldn't affect their land battle balance too much either. Maybe you squeeze in one or two less units overall in your build, but anyway. Skaven. Resolved an issue on Skaven vehicle units' wheels where they were not moving with the correct speed and direction. Okay, moving on. Slanesh doesn't really get anything as well, or Nakari's jumping attack is better against infantry now. Cool. Again, the Empire, no fix for Griffin HP. They're just, Carl's just crying in the corner with sad, decrepit Deathclaw on its deathbed. But, yeah, hey, Ostermark can now recruit Huntsman Generals, so there you go. Tzeentch is also going to get some changes. Let's see here. Lore of Wild is accessible now by Blue Scribes, which is nice. Multiplayer caps on Zangors, already talked about there. Changeling now costs 1,000 base, but the price scales based on the transformation selected. So finally the Changeling, in my opinion, has been properly implemented and is now usable in multiplayer to change into more things than just Kugath, so that'll be interesting to see. I don't know how much, if at all, that will affect Siege. It depends a lot on how things are balanced. Once we get our hands on the patch, I'm going to dive in, check out, see, like, there's certain lords in particular that I have my eye on, like Marcus Wolfheart, for example, for an AoE net and really strong ranged attack, or, you know, some other kind of utility lords, but I'll have to dive into that and see if I can, and others, of course, as well. I'm sure we'll be sending me replays of different Changeling transformations. Hopefully, it actually works out okay, because the Changeling has been more or less absent from multiplayer, other than, again, transforming into Kugath or sometimes Kairos, although I feel like that's just going through unnecessary extra steps. But anyway, yeah, Blue Scribes also get a significant cost decrease. Needleth Vortex Beast gets a slight cost increase. Probably needs more than that, but remains to be seen. Probably actually need to just nerf regrowth as well, but that's probably a discussion for another day. Needleth Regiment of Renown also gets its cost increased, even though it's probably kind of terrible. Oh no, but the base damage of its ability has been increased by approximately 60%. Okay, because yeah, its castable ability was just awful, so interesting. Cockatrice. So the AI will be able to use it better there. Zangors again with their cost increase. Getting on now to the Vampires. Nothing for either of them. And for Warriors of Chaos, do they still have access to Zangors? That's the main thing for me, because I really feel like they should not, but I guess they still do. I guess it's fine. I guess it's just how it's going to be. But yeah, Wood Elves. Okay, anything here? Wood Elf Beastcasters having the wrong transformation of Kadon's spells when reducing Winds of Magic cost in their spell tree. Okay, yeah, they had the Manticore one in their spell tree. I didn't even realize. Interesting. Yeah, so that's mostly it. Some stuff here for multiplayer. Is this what, multiplayer campaigns? Yeah, it looks like so. Lots and lots and lots of fixes here listed at the bottom. You guys can go look through these on your own time. I won't be going through them. But yeah, a lot of fixes. Hopefully, you know, everything here listed is actually fixed. I know sometimes they'll put things in the patch notes and then it ends up not actually being fixed as advertised, but it's a fairly hefty patch. I mean, I've been recording for almost 30 minutes now, and it's a lot. A lot. Yeah, and then, of course, they say a nice little piece here at the end about talking about taking feedback, and I will say, at least on the Siege changes, I've seen Creative Assembly directly take feedback. I gotta give a shout out to Okoy, the legendary memer here on YouTube, and just an outstanding gentleman. Made a big post a while back about Sieges, and, I mean, really just summarized very well a lot of the feelings that the community had about Sieges and what made them so terrible. And Creative Assembly seems to have taken that to heart. I know there are some changes here, and I know from personal experience that Creative Assembly is looking at what else they can change, you know, going forward. They're looking at some other parameters of possibly modifying, so there are some changes here, hopefully more in the future, because I think they have the right intention of making Sieges, you know, feel more, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, English is hard, but just more engaging and more fun to play is the main sort of crux of the argument, right? And yeah, so hopefully Creative Assembly can continue to implement that stuff. I'm definitely looking forward to more updates in the future. In terms of multiplayer balance, there's a lot that this patch didn't do that needs to be done still, but some good things. Definitely bringing some of the DLC stuff in line is absolutely, you know, what we would expect from a 4.1 update. And then some other nice little things. The Salon one in particular is not something that I expected, so that's a nice little surprise for me personally. Something I've wanted for a long time, and I think the Lizardmen get a nice little boost from that. So anyway, that's it for me for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. I'll be back tomorrow with more multiplayer content for you all, so be sure to stay tuned for some excellent battles. We're going to get, I've got a couple more from 4.0 recorded and ready to show you, so we'll get to the 4.1 battles probably towards the weekend. But anyway, thanks again. We'll see you next time.